Most people spend 40 years building a resume only to spend their retirement protecting it. But my guest today did the unthinkable. After 4 decades as a power player in Fortune 500 marketing and high-stakes law firm PR, Elizabeth Coplan didn't just retire. She redirected. She took the skills she used to build corporate empires and used them to build a movement that looks death and grief right in the eye. If you think your best work is behind you because of your date on your birth certificate, stay tuned. Elizabeth is living proof that your second act isn't just a hobby. It might be the very reason you were born. Now, let's grow. Now, before we get started, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by the No Negative Energy Life brand. We simply help people to learn to get rid of negative thoughts and think more positive ones so that they can live better lives. For life coaching services and more, check us out at nonegative.energy. That's no negative, all one phrase, .energy. Due to expire listeners, today let's welcome Elizabeth Coplan. Well, here we go. We are here today on the Due to Expire podcast. I am so delighted to have my good friend Elizabeth Coplan here today with us, and she is a powerhouse. I am excited to not only know her, but to have the opportunity to just really allow you as the audience to know her as well. She's all over the place, New York, Costa Rica, wherever. She's there, and she's making it happen even internationally with some of the work that she's done. So Elizabeth, welcome today to today's podcast. It's so great to see you once again, my friend.
Good to see you.
So are you hanging out in Seattle right now, right?
Right now, actually, I'm on Bainbridge Island, just outside of Seattle. Yes.
And how's the weather out there? I just need to ask that because
actually, it's a glorious spring day, no clouds in the sky. And after this, I'm going to go do my one huge vice, which is buy more plants for my garden.
Oh, my goodness. More plants. All right. Well,
more plants.
Now that we know that you're a plant lover as well, we'll have to definitely get some tips on the next podcast. But for today's purposes, what we want to do is kind of dive in a little bit into Elizabeth's work, not only as a person who is really the founder of Grief Dialogues, which is a wonderful organization. She's going to tell you a little bit more about that in a second. But also, she's been in the corporate world for 40 years. She was in the corporate world for 40 years and has done a lot in that area. And I think that some of that has fueled her work here as she talks a little bit more about grief and her own grief. And we're going to get into some of that now. But, Elizabeth, here's the first question that I want to kind of just throw out at you. I know that a spark for your work in the grief area was surrounding the losses that you experienced in 2013, the tragedies that took place. I know that as your life has gone on and you've shifted your perspective in terms of how you look at life, how did those tragedies, those unfortunate tragedies, help you to get to this place where you are today?
Right. Great question. Actually, it was compounded a number of times. So it kind of came to a pinnacle in 2013. My father died at age 65 in 1996, and my mom in 2001. And while those were very heartbreaking losses, particularly my father, because he had just retired and we thought we had plenty more years to go. But I was able to weather that pretty well. That seemed kind of natural for older parents to pass on.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely suffered through grief, but nothing what I would say extraordinary. Then over the next several years, culminating in 2013 with 3 losses, including a horrific accident. A dear friend of mine's husband was in just a completely fluke accident. Nothing that he did wrong. And then the loss of my cousin, who was like a sister to me, to ovarian cancer. Also, and then there were several other things. It also was the year that my then 88-year-old father-in-law said to me, I was asking him a little bit about what he wanted at the end of his life, and what, did he want a funeral? Did he want, what, nothing, something? And his comment to me, I mentioned he was 88 at the time,
Yes. Hmm.
and he said to me, if I die, it will be due to a medical error.
Wow.
And I think that combined with all those other losses, I'm going to say more unnatural losses. A friend of mine also lost a child during that time. Um, that compound was like, we're not even. What do you mean if you die? I'm sorry. Death is the great equalizer. And then the next thing that pushed me way over to start Great Dialogues was I was working at the time at the University of Washington School of Law as their marketing and communications director. And people knew I had been in California where my cousin was, but they assumed I was on vacation.
Hmm.
And when I came back, I saw a couple of people in the coffee room and they said, "Oh, how was your vacation?" And I said, "Well, I was actually there because my cousin, and she was in the final stages of her life, and I was there to help her. My sister and I were both there to help her pass on and help her husband. They'd only been married 6 years. So when I said that, they looked at me like, "Oh, I don't want to hear about this." And
Hmm.
they'd quickly fill their coffee cup, or for whatever reason they were in the coffee room, and they'd leave. And I just realized not only is this something literally everybody's going to do, and you will suffer some, or need to work through some sort of grief if you've ever loved anybody.
Right.
It's They're going to go, right, at some point. And
Yeah.
this is something we all do and we all experience, but nobody wants to talk about it. So I wrote a short play. Actually, it's about my cousin's death, but I turned it into a mom to make it a little more relatable.
Yeah.
And what I found when that play was performed was that people would come up to me afterwards, if they knew I was the playwright, and say to me, "Wow, that was a really great play. Something like that happened to me when my mom died," or,
Mhm.
you know, or my brother and I really got into it when our sister died, that sort of thing. And I realized that my play and plays like it were there as permission for other people to share their stories.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole grief dialogues thing came about. It's like, wow, if I could have other playwrights, other situations, not just my story or my voice, get other people involved, how great that would be for audience members. And that's exactly what happened when I started Grief Dialogues. We would do a talk back afterwards, and often the talk back was longer than the show because people just really wanted to share their stories. And that's what we had provided permission for them to do so.
So it seems as though grief dialogues in and of itself is serving as a true catalyst for people to have these conversations that they may have never had before in their lives, or before seeing a play or reading a book. This has given them permission to actually express themselves. What a great way for people to actually come together and to really discuss matters in a very public way. Now, that's the
Right.
big part. It's very public,
Right.
and individuals are sharing things for the first time. How has that given you encouragement as you've moved
Right.
along in this area?
Oh, wow. A lot of encouragement, especially when I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore because it's a lot of work. Then invariably someone will email me or call me or run into me in the grocery store and say, "Oh, I saw that. And that reminded me of my dad," etc. A couple of things that often happen when people, so the show is, roughly an hour and 15 minutes, and then
Mhm.
we take a break and people can go home. It's not like intermission and then, part two. But there's a talk back, and I'd say about 90% of the audience stays.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, sometimes the talkbacks are longer than the actual show. But what I love the most is, one, seeing people stay because clearly they want to, because they
Hmm.
could leave. And two, people leaving saying things like, I didn't expect to laugh as much as I did. Because some of these are true stories. Some of them are enlightened stories, but
Right.
there is humor a lot of times. Even in the saddest case, there's humor. And so to be able to share all the feelings by having all these different scenarios, these different plays and poetry in there,
Yes.
the feedback is just always tremendous. And actually, the feeling for me is now that we're getting so many requests for the show. That also must be because people are getting some real meaning out of it. I don't like to say meaning making. That sounds like you have to have a purpose.
Right.
And that's the beauty of these performances is that you can come and have no purpose other than to have an evening's entertainment. It's kind of I'm actually working on a musical that's kind of a cross between Terms of Endearment and Grease. I
Oh,
mean, it's
wow.
got all the music, the
That's
fun
interesting.
music from the 50s, but it's the sadness of the death. So you can experience this just pure art. Our current immersive director, Danny Davis, that's what she wants, it pure art.
Yes.
I want another side of it, but together it's a really fantastic opportunity for people to be able to talk about their own losses or not, you know.
Right.
And I have had people who said, well, I didn't want to say anything, but I just liked being in the room with other people who had gone through similar situations. So, yeah, that's what we do and why we do it.
And this topic of really death in and of itself, I mean, you've moved into an atmosphere and an area where people are not clamoring to talk about this stuff, right? It is taboo in certain circles. You don't say anything about death. As a matter of fact, I know many times in the African American community, I've heard people say, well, we don't talk about death because we figure like it's going to come faster when we talk about it. It's going to manifest, right? And so people are staying away from this topic. Now, I know that there's been challenges for you, and tell us a little bit about how your history as a marketing exec and all of this stuff prepare you for the challenge of marketing in this area of grief and loss.
Right. Well, that it has to be a challenge because in the wake of life sounds hopeful. Grief dialogues, not so much. And I've actually gotten a lot of pushback about changing the name to grief dialogues. But I deliberately want to use the word grief
Yes.
because that is a physical feeling that you have that needs to be identified. The challenge is the pushback you get and people not willing to come see a show or experience it and therefore still make a judgment about it, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that part is hard. I've
Hmm.
never had anybody walk out of a show. It's very hard to get them to the show sometimes.
Okay.
But I think in fact, every case I know of where I really pushed somebody or twisted their arm to come, they've all said they were really glad they came. I even had a show last May in Los Angeles. It was in honor of Memorial Day, and uh, four couples, young couples in their 30s, came because their friend was one of the actors, and they really just came to support her. That's the only
Right.
reason why they came.
Hmm.
Afterwards, one of them came up to me and they said, "Oh my gosh, we are so glad we came. We didn't even have any military family, to totally identify with some of the things you were saying. But oh my gosh, the love. We certainly love our family, etc. Anyway, they got so much out of it, and not because they came to hear about grief or death or dying. The word death, as you say, people react like it's contagious,
Oh yeah,
and
they're
I get
afraid
that
of it.
not wanting to manifest it, but I have
Right.
had personal experience where when people openly talk about it, that those who are dying openly talk about being at peace, with their own death, being sad, very close. A personal friend of mine, he was in his 70s and he was dying of pancreatic cancer. And all he
Hmm.
asked was that his son and his future dialogue didn't talk about the wedding planning because
Mm,
Mike wasn't going to make it long
he
enough
wasn't going to
to
be
be able
there.
to
Yeah.
see the wedding.
Okay.
But that's it. Otherwise, he was like, his normal self. And the people he left behind have told me that it was his acceptance of what was happening that allowed them to have a much easier time with their grief. Do they
Hmm.
still mourn him? Do they miss him like all get out? Um, are her sons sad he never got to see his grandchildren? Yes, they
Right.
are.
Yes.
But they are also at peace knowing that Mike was at peace. And the reason being at peace was he was willing to talk about it and talk to others about it.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine some years ago who was in the hospital, and she was, in a dying state. And her family just refused to listen to her as she was saying that she was ready and it was okay, and that she had lived a full life, and that she was not afraid of what was in front of her, which was death. So there was a tremendous struggle with her trying to convince her family that it was okay. And they didn't want to talk about death with her. They told her, you're losing your faith. It's not, you should be hoping for a miracle. And she was like, no, I'm good right now.
Mhm.
And that's something that is hard to deal with. Have you run into that a lot with families who just really struggle with this topic? And
Mhm.
when one person is at peace, as you stated, but everybody else is like in chaos, saying, no, 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 this can't be. We're not going to let this happen.
Right. Right. Yeah, that case. I come from a very Catholic family. So
Mhm.
yes, in fact, when my cousin was dying, she had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer several years prior, went through the surgery, all the chemo, everything, and it was a horrible time for her. The chemo was just the roughest it could be. She came out of it clean, and then it came back. And when
Mm.
it came back 2 years after her clean report, she said, I'm not going to go through that again. I'm not going to do the chemo again. And the family was quite judgmental about that. God created chemo, and but the thing, and Myra was a deacon in the church, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like she gave up her faith, not at all.
Right.
The miracle actually is death. It's the
Yes.
peace of death. It is going, if you're very religious, it's going home to God, going home to whatever spiritual being.
Right.
If you want to keep it within religion, it's letting go of the pain and suffering of this world. Now, her husband kept saying, no, but it's the pain and suffering in this world that makes us strong. Well, to a point, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Hmm.
But there's a point where you also say, I'm good. I
Right.
want to go on to whatever the next adventure is, regardless of religion or anything else. I'm ready for the next adventure. If there is one, doesn't matter. I'm ready to go. And I would say the last day of her life, and I was told she wasn't actively dying, but you could see sort of the peace on her face. She was
Yes.
becoming more angel-like. That's,
Hmm.
might sound
I've
a little
I've
woo-woo,
witnessed
but
that. I've witnessed it. Yeah.
yeah, so when she died that night, we weren't surprised. I wasn't surprised anyway. I think the hospice worker was, but I wasn't.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I know that the things that you are producing, the things that you are creating, are helping to give those types of family members an opportunity to really discuss and talk about their own pain and hurt. And obviously, we've heard people have their regrets about how they responded to their loved one's death and how they felt like they didn't support them in the dying process. And so, as it relates to theater, and I just want to go there for a second. Why do you think that the stage is a very effective way for these conversations to come about? Because
Right.
people will say, well, I go to the movies or I go to a play to be entertained, right?
Hmm.
And we, you and I have talked about, the term that I love, edutainment, which is
Hmm.
what, No Negative Energy is about. And this podcast is about really educating people through entertainment, so to speak, or entertainment mediums. I'll put it
Right.
like that. And so with that, why do you think the stage is an effective way to do this when people want to go to just be entertained?
Well, that's the beauty, quite frankly, of the stage is you can go just to be entertained. It's a story or it's a series of stories, and you can leave it at that, and you can,
Hmm.
applaud at the end and walk out the door and talk about it over coffee. You can also take the message that's being given to you and talk about it with your friends, your loved ones, just and not in a, oh, I guess I should plan for my death, but more in a, a storytelling way. If that actor really resonated with me, or that story about, oh my gosh, that's my sister all over again. I forgot how it was. It
Right.
also, my off Broadway show Till Death was also showed the various types of caregiving that a family might be giving, and how one will take it very seriously and do it like a job, and the other one will, another family member might be the one hand holding, and oftentimes they're both needed. But it's the thing I have heard a lot actually is when people say to me, I did the caregiving was so intense, and I'm going to give a shout out to caregivers, was so
Hmm.
intense. I didn't realize that would have been better if I just sat by his bed and held his hand for a while. But there were so many
Wow.
other things that had to get done. That's the one regret I hear most from people who've seen either Till Death or they've seen some of these other plays, which says, I wished I had just spent more time with him and not worried about cleaning up the kitchen. You know,
Yes.
Cleaning up the
Yes.
kitchen means it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you look at the clean kitchen, but when you're taking care of someone, you don't. The end will most likely be death, and that's not always where you want to get to, right? So,
And the kitchen will always be there to
and the
clean,
kitchen will
right?
always be,
It
and they'll
always
probably get
yeah.
dirtier.
Right. Right.
Right,
At some
right.
point, right?
Yeah, right. But even so, sort of sitting back and relaxing and not trying to create humor, but sometimes seeing the humor in it. When my cousin was dying, and as I mentioned, they were, not hadn't been married all that long, her husband was so devastated that he was really in the way.
Mm.
So I would give him assignments to like start cooking dinner. He was a terrible cook. But we'd encourage him, and he would go to Walmart and buy a fish steamer or something like, great, fantastic. My sister and I look at each other like, oh my God, that's going to be awful. And then that's kind of what I wrote about, right? And then I've had
Yeah.
people say, oh my gosh, yes, that was my dad. He didn't know what to do with himself. And just relating even on those funny moments
Yes.
that,
Yes.
one little character, you just, and I do have a short play called Hospice, a love story. It's two sisters after the death of their mother, and they were both in the room when the mother died, but they remember it completely differently, which is very common. Very common. That's probably the play that I get the most feedback in terms of, oh my gosh, now I understand why my brother was saying what he was saying, because he was there, but he said what he saw, and I said what I saw, and it was completely different.
Oh,
She
wow.
was in pain. No, she wasn't in pain.
Hmm.
We washed the sheets. No, we never washed the sheets. It was just things like that. So kind of being able to identify with the entertainment part, and I don't know, maybe I'm putting too much word on the word entertainment, but there is a lot of laughter that sort of comes naturally when you are dealing with love and the end of life. There are some funny moments, but whatever the moment is, embracing that moment is basically
Hmm.
what all these plays are about.
I saw your great stage play Till Death. And when I attended that, and I also had the opportunity to be on stage with Chad, the director. I think it's
Hmm.
Chad Austin, right? The director
Right.
of Till
Hmm.
Death off Broadway in New York. It was absolutely fantastic. But what I was blown away by was the amount of people in the audience as we were discussing the play from the stage, which really was very entertaining in and of itself. I mean, I'd never
Hmm.
been to a play that dealt with death, but it did have you laughing, and it did have you reflecting on your life, and there was some joy involved in that process. But
Right.
to hear how many people connected with one or two of the characters in the play
Hmm.
was essential. Do you find yourself really drawing on the experiences of others and maybe creating characters that kind of reflect who that person is and how they, are dealing with life in and of itself?
Absolutely. Till Death is a good example. There are six characters in the play, and five of them were people who were in my life.
Wow.
So I could really use that. But then I wanted to have one character, And I wanted that character to add, dramatic effect. I wanted this to be an adopted child, a grown man at this point, and I wanted it to be a deathbed confession of his mother
Okay.
to him saying, "We adopted you."
Hmm.
And at first, when I was writing that scene and I was workshopping it with other instructors and playwrights, people said, "Oh, that never happens." Well, turns out it does. It does happen.
Hmm.
And in fact, one of the playwrights in one group I was in, she said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't, on my father's deathbed, he told me he wasn't my father." And
Wow.
she said, I was 50 at the time. And then she told me her story. So then I did more research and I was able to create a character that I felt in interviewing some of these people who had experienced it, by interviewing them and getting their experiences. And then what was so interesting to me was when people would say to me, I was adopted, or we adopted
Yeah.
a child. So I felt good about having really worked hard to make that character believable. And on the flip side of that, one of the characters in Till Death, the character of Lucy, is pretty much based on me. And when people say, "God, that Lucy, she's such a witch," I would be like, "Wait a minute." But
That's
of course,
not Elizabeth.
that's not me. But you were saying too about why theater. I think theater, because it's yes, you can sit on a big screen or you can be in your living room and you get those big TVs or whatever, but you're really not in it like you are a stage play.
Right.
And and it's immediate. It is happening now.
Hmm.
And anything can happen.
Yes.
Anything can happen.
Yes.
You can, so in fact, I almost saw my play every single night because friends would be going to the play and I wasn't planning to see it every. But the beauty of that for me was every single night there was something new, something different. There was, an actor would deliver a line differently than he ever had before, and it gave it
Yeah.
a whole new meaning, and it was really cool. So I think theater is, well, it's immediate,
Yes.
it's right there. It is also the great empathy generator, whether this happened to you or not.
Right.
If the acting is good and the story is good, you can certainly empathize with whatever the protagonist is going through, or even the antagonist is going through. So that's why I love theater.
I think that with all of the technology that's going on, you have AI and really just coming in and very strong. People are dealing with, much like, what we're doing now on camera. I think there's going to be a rejuvenation of the stage play presence because I think that, when you get into a theater and you're
Hmm.
sitting there, you can feel something that's different than when you're watching it on television. There's
Hmm.
just something different about being in the space with the actors and having that experience. And so I also noticed too as well that when people leave the theater, you hear all types of conversations and you see people nodding. You see some people maybe crying. You see some people who are just in awe of what they just experienced and how it connected with them. Do you have a favorite experience that you had as relates to a conversation with someone post seeing one of your shows?
Oh gosh, there's actually quite a few of them that come to mind. I will say, actually, this what started out to be horrifying, but turned into a really amazing conversation, was Till Death. It wasn't opening night. I think it was the second night, but the end of the play where the mother tells the son Jason that he is adopted, and he loses it. He just totally
Yes.
loses it. And he feels betrayed. He feels like his childhood, all his life he felt he didn't quite fit in, even though the parents were very loving, and now he knows why. And anyway, he just lost it. Well, an elderly man in the audience yelled out because, of course, the mother is saying, "I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted," and the son is yelling at her and on her deathbed. Anyway, this audience member yells out, "But she loved you so much." And I'm sitting there, and
Right
I
there,
couldn't
right there in the
quite
theater.
right in the theater, and I couldn't quite hear what he said, and I was like, "Oh my God, he doesn't like the play, and he's now yelling at the play, and this is terrible." So, and it's at the very end. So, 10 more minutes of the play. And by the way, spoiler alert, that doesn't get resolved. That's one thing about when I write it,
Yes.
some things make it resolved and some don't. And that's life.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Mm-hmm.
no
Yeah.
happy ending bow tying or anything. But then when I went out into the foyer afterwards, his family were waiting for me because they were very apologetic. But when I realized what happened, I said, "Oh, this is actually a wonderful comment because he
Right.
felt it. He felt, the angst of the mom
Yes.
trying to justify why they never told this 35-year-old man that he was, adopted on day one." And
Yeah.
and so we had a really fabulous conversation as a family, and so that probably is the one that sticks with me the most. He
That
started
is a
out like, "Oh no, what have I done?"
that is
You
a
know.
great story. Just to know that this gentleman was so into it that he couldn't help himself, right?
No,
He
right.
just had to say something.
Hmm.
And so
Yes.
that is hilarious. And so even with that, I want to just go just a little bit more personal with you as it relates
Mhm.
to the Honoring Choices film. And I want the listening audience to know that Elizabeth really, in a very creative and artful way, put her father's process of dying in a play or on screen. As a matter of fact, on screen in a short movie form. And I thought that one, Elizabeth, this was phenomenal in terms of
Mm.
how you told the story. And you are reflected as one of the characters in that particular film as well.
The bossy one.
Right, the
Yeah.
bossy one, right? That's not Elizabeth either.
No.
But well, Scott and I will talk about that later. But
Yeah, really.
anyway, but here's the thing. And Scott, by the way, is her husband, and I want everybody to know I give a shout out to my friend Scott as well, who actually has co-authored one of your projects as well.
He
And so,
has. He
and
has.
we'll talk
Yes.
about that in just a second. But I know that with your father's passing, it meant a lot to you to express the things that you and your sister went through as it
Hmm.
relates to that. But I thought it was profound when you actually allowed the audience to see that process happen as a reflection of various cultures. And that to me was important. So obviously you saw a thread with your personal situation and you were able to relate it to other cultures and other
Right.
people. Talk to us a little bit more about why you chose to go that route to display honoring choices in
Right.
various cultural formats.
Well, it did start as a play. It was a play that was commissioned by Honoring Choices Pacific Northwest that helps people plan for their end of life. And it was at their conference that we performed it for the very first
Hmm.
time in February 2020. And we all know what happened in March of 2020.
Yes, we do.
So then I actually started to do the production on Zoom because it works, because those kinds of conversations, getting a terminal diagnosis and planning, those were happening on Zoom during COVID. Um, but what I found, the original cast just happened to be a white man, elderly man, his two white daughters, and a black doctor. That's just how we casted it. There was no rhyme or reason. Just it was more based on age. In fact,
Okay.
it was totally based on age.
Hmm.
So that was well received. And then one of the actors I was working with on another show, Annelle, who is African American, she said, these are the conversations we try to have with our family, and they just don't happen. The father's just too stubborn. So she actually helped me write it to be culturally appropriate for that audience, and we had all black cast. And then, being from originally from Texas, I wanted to do it in Spanish. And that worked really
Mm.
well because the father only spoke Spanish. The daughters spoke Spanish to the father, but English to each other, and the doctor did English and Spanish as well. And then again, I brought in a Hispanic dramaturg who helped me do it culturally appropriately. And that one is also, I really want to do that one again, to be honest with you, or even make a film out of it. But the story itself is universal.
Hmm.
How do we get our loved ones, our elderly loved ones, to finally plan or tell us what they want? Because it's out of love. We want to know what they want at the end of life, right?
That's right.
So I actually wrote this. Obviously, I was commissioned to write it, but I wrote it with my dad's story because my dad's story didn't have a happy ending. He
Ah,
never did
okay.
tell us what he wanted. He went
Okay.
too quickly.
Okay.
And so this was also cathartic for me because I was able to write the ending I wanted. as well as kind of a cautionary tale or how to get a curmudgeon-y guy to start to open up a little bit, you know.
Right, right.
Um, so, so that's a very, that show is probably one of the most meaningful of all the plays I've written, because it helped me tremendously myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was beautifully written, well acted. Hats off to all the people who, in the various formats, were a part of that because you had different actors, obviously on stage, film, and then on Zoom as well.
Mhm.
And all three formats were effective. So along the lines of theater and all that, plays have what we call acts, right? And so we've entitled this episode "The Second Act," and you are in your what I would call a second prominent act in your life, moving from corporate America to now being on the creative side of life and really helping to promote things in a different way as it relates to life, as it relates to how we relate to other human beings, so on and so forth. What would you say to someone right now? Because you started really making this shift in your 60s, right?
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
And some people get discouraged. They're saying,
Right.
well, I'm too old to do this, or I don't have enough
Mhm.
time to do this. And yeah, I mean, the name of the podcast is due to expire. And so we all know that, right? We're
Right.
going, but we don't have to just sit around and wait for our expiration date to come. And you're a
Mhm.
great example of that, of not waiting until, death is knocking at your door for you to think, oh, wait a minute, I wish I would have done this or done that. How have you
Mhm.
fostered the attitude of living without regret, living in a way such that you believe that you can still have an impact regardless of your age?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually just after being at the University of Washington School of Law, it's a pretty um, high up position, and I felt well cared for there, and the professors liked me, and I liked the professors. It was a really cool situation. And I had pretty much planned to retire there, and then things changed and so forth. And I had some health issues, so I had to resign, quite frankly. And then it was like, well, it was a pretty big commute to the University of Washington. In fact, I would often stay in Seattle instead of coming back to Bainbridge every night. So I thought, well, once I got my health back, I'll take a lesser job, maybe something on Bainbridge, so I don't have to commute. And I did that, and I really didn't like it. Not that
Mm.
I'm so bossy or have to be in control, but when people half my age were giving me projects to do and telling me how to do them, and realize, you could do this in half the time and make double the money. After about a year, I thought this is maybe I'm too caught up in my identity. My career is my identity. If I don't have that anymore, who the heck am I? My
Mm.
children were grown, gone, and so forth. Um, and then I started thinking about what I wanted to do when I was much younger. And I always wanted to be an actress. And I actually was an actress in my early 20s in New York City. And I often say, one day I realized I could either eat or pay rent. I could not do both. So then I went to college and had a corporate career. But I just thought, what can I do with theater? And it was the grief of losing my cousin that was the initial impetus to start writing plays about it. I felt because of health issues that I wasn't going to be able to act, and
Hmm.
directing is also very strenuous. So I thought, I'm going to write some plays. So it's sort of evolved, but it really was, what brought me joy when I was 13?
Wow.
Being in plays. That's what brought me joy when I was 13. So it was kind of that going back in time and trying to remember what it was that what my dreams were. What were my dreams? If my dream had been to be an astronaut, I probably would have been out of luck. But at 62, I wasn't going to become an astronaut.
Right.
But I could have, become an astrologist or
Yes.
something like that. We have a small planetarium here on Bainbridge Island. I could have become involved with them. I was involved with the founding of Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. That
Okay.
was fantastic. In 2013, we opened that. But again, that was somebody else's dream to open that. That was
Right.
what the founder, Cynthia Sears, wonderful woman, bless her
Hmm.
heart, and that was her dream. And I was so happy to be one of the founding board members to make that a reality. But that wasn't my dream, and so thinking about what would my 13-year-old Elizabeth want to do, and
Wow.
that's how I came to this. And it kind of kept growing. And to your point about to expire, when you start something in your 60s, you go, okay, I got what, 5 good years, so let's just give it all we've got and see what happens. And I just would throw one thing at the wall after another, and it all stuck. Now
Wow.
then, so then instead of focusing on one thing, I found myself focusing on way too many things, but I loved every second of it. And then we
Yes.
kind of narrowed it down. I kind of kept a small board because I really wanted it to be my vision.
Yes.
Uh, I have someone who I think in the next 2 years will be eager to kind of take over the reins
Mm-hmm.
of dialogues. I would I would like to officially retire at 75, so I got 3 years. But I did. My
I
doctor
don't
did
know.
say
We
to
don't. We
me,
don't. We want to keep Elizabeth active here. In this
I
space.
well, my doctor. I said to my doctor not too long ago that I was thinking about retiring, and he just started laughing, and he goes, "How long do you think that'll last?" And I said, "Well,
Exactly.
2 weeks." And he said, "I'll give you one."
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so when you enjoy something, whatever it is, when you enjoy it, you don't want to let it go. You want
Right.
to do more and you want to improve upon it. Now I'm doing immersive theater. Immersive theater was not a thing when I was doing theater. So now I get the challenge of learning about immersive theater on the bedrock of what I know, which is
Mm-hmm.
theater.
Okay.
So, um, so yeah, and I did come up with one thing that it's just for me that I don't look to be in any gallery or anything, but I really, really love photography. So I take
Okay.
pictures, but they're only for me. I'll share it with family or on
Right.
Instagram or something. So but I'm not looking to open exhibit in a gallery. So that's my other, that one's a hobby. I guess the one thing I will say is about a year ago, we were at a reunion of Scott's high school chums, and one
Hmm.
one of one of his schoolmates said to me, "Oh, you have such a nice hobby," meaning, brief dialogue. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is not a hobby. This
Yeah.
is
This is work. It's
this is
work.
work." But I do love it. I do get such great pleasure. And like I said earlier, every time I think, "Oh, this is just too much," the fundraising is the hardest
Right.
part.
Right.
Funny, I had no problem asking for money to build the art museum, but for some reason, my own projects are tough. But it's a lot of work, but I do love
Yes.
it. I do love it,
You
except the
know,
fundraising.
what I picked up, one of the things that I picked up from what you just said is that inner 13-year-old finding out, what brought you passion as a young person, and then living out that passion. And some people, they suppress that child, or they suppress that feeling that they had, thinking that, well, I don't have time for that now, and I have to do more adult things, so to speak. I have
Right.
to work and I have to do this. Well, this is work, but it's a work of passion. And I think that people, if they find their passion in life, if they can pursue that, I don't care what age you are, if you pursue that passion, then you'll be rewarded. And that
Right.
reward can come in various ways, but most importantly, just the joy that you have of sharing your
Mhm.
art and your work with others, and you see the impact that it's having. I think that is truly one of the greatest rewards that we can receive as humans. Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
And it's hard when you have other obligations. I'm not going to
oh yeah,
discredit that. I
yes,
did
yes.
have the luxury of, my husband and I lived very frugally. We
Hmm.
didn't want for anything, and our children didn't want, but we didn't buy everything either. We didn't have the
Right.
fanciest house or the car or anything. And so when I did retire, I did have a little luxury of taking some of that money and being able to start this project. So um, that I'm very grateful for.
As we wind things down here, you mentioned the immersive theater and the immersive work.
Mhm.
And we're actually bringing that work here where I am to the city of Detroit. And I'm excited about working with you on this particular project, which is going to take place May 4th and May 5th. 2026, and it's actually at the Grosse Pointe War Memorial. And so if you're around the city of Detroit, in the city of Detroit during that time period of May 4th and May 5th, we would love to see you come out to see this immersive experience. But I want you to, Elizabeth, if you can just share with the listening audience right now, when we say immersive theater, what is that, and how does it look? Is it just
Right.
a regular stage play or is it something different? What's the big difference with this?
The big difference is that the audience is in not necessarily, I don't want to say they're involved, like they have to participate, but they don't necessarily sit down. We don't have that many chairs out. You're really a part of whatever the play is. You're right there. You can touch the actors even.
Mm,
Um, and the beauty of our immersive plays, and Danny was instrumental in making it so the audience had agency. So yes, you're able to move around. You're also able to go to another room to see another play in kind of a choose your own adventure way.
hmm.
But you can also go and sit and listen to the cello. We have actually the cellist for the Detroit Symphony is performing for us. So it
Awesome.
by immersive, it means the audience has agency to move around. We have some little activities, or they can sit it out. Uh, so they really, it's however they want to embrace the show. They don't sit in a dark theater. They, in fact, when we do have done it in a theater, we put chairs on the stage.
Okay.
So it's not, so you're in it, but you don't have to interact if you don't want to.
So instead of us having front row seats, you're
Mhm.
actually on the stage with the actors, if we
Right,
want to look at it that
right.
way.
You can pull back and not, but it's like bringing you in to be
Yeah.
eavesdropping, so to speak, on the situation. And
And this will be set up in different rooms where you're actually entering into a room where that particular scene is set up already and the actors are engaging and they're ready to go. And you just walk in and you can actually be right there front and center with the
right.
dialogue and the acting that's going on.
Exactly. And then we have some things that's all centered around some very colorful ribbons that, if you want, again, there's no right or wrong, but you can write the name of your loved one and pin it to one of the colorful ribbons.
Wow.
We're going to have another, like an art installation kind of thing, a small one. So you can make it what you want, or you can stand in the back and just observe.
And I can imagine people being that close. For some of them, it could really impact them. Will there be opportunities for people to talk about their feelings during this
Mhm.
process of the immersive theater experience?
Absolutely. We'll have some discussion afterwards. We During the show, because of the way it's done, they may or may not be able to interact with the actors, but I don't want to say they won't be able to. We've seen people like one woman in one of the stories. We're not doing this one in Detroit, but she lost her husband in a motorcycle accident, and um, one of the audience members came up to her and again shared a similar story and wanted to give her a hug, and that was great. That's, the actor felt like just so genuine that she had delivered a genuine performance. So you can interact with them. You can't hold them up from the next show to the next performance, but you can certainly interact with them. Sometimes the playwrights are there and audience members will talk to them about what they wrote and how they wrote it. So it's really meant to have, like I said, agency. Ask questions, talk about things. Um, yeah, the whole part. It's not just, and that's why we do it immersively, is to
Hmm.
encourage that kind of participation rather than just sitting in a dark theater and saying, "That's our show for tonight, folks. Drive safely." We really want them to feel like they can open up or ask questions
Good.
or leave if that's
Right.
more comfortable.
Okay. So May
Mhm.
4th, May 5th, 2026, 6:30 p.m. both evenings, right there at the Grosse Pointe War Memorial. Where can they get more information about that particular experience?
They can go to griefdialogues.com. In the banner on the top, it says "In the Wake of Life." It's a blue banner. Click on that, and Detroit is our next show. So as you scroll down the page for "In the Wake of Life," you'll see the the Detroit show, and it has the information and how you get tickets. Tickets are free.
Hmm.
Donations are lovely, acceptable. We are a nonprofit, but it is a free show because we want as many people to feel like they can access it as, as they can, which is exactly, we want to share this beauty and we want to share this opportunity to talk about death because We're all going to do it.
Right. And, other side of that is that I don't know many people who would actually pay top dollar to go and see a play about death. So,
Well,
but
they saw, terms of endearment. I
oh,
mean, there
that's
are, this
true.
is the
That's
funny
true.
thing.
That's
There's a
true.
lot of, ordinary people. I could
But
name
you
all
know
that.
what? You know
Oscar-winning
what?
shows. The
But
Titanic,
yes, exactly. But this is worth it, though, everyone. I'm telling you, even though this is at no cost to the public, this production is top notch. This production has top notch actors, a director that's top notch. As a matter of fact, Danny Davis, I believe, is she an award winning, Tony Award winning?
She's an Emmy award-winning,
Okay.
Tony-nominated director. Yeah,
Emmy Award
yeah,
winning, Tony nominated director, Danny
right.
Davis. And
So,
so
yes.
this is not something that, Elizabeth and the crew just threw together in the backyard and say, let's just try it out. No, this is something that has a lot of time that has been put into making it excellent. And so we definitely want to invite everyone in the Detroit area. And if you're not from Detroit and you're going to be in Detroit or near Detroit during that time period, come on through, get your tickets at no cost, May 4th, May 5th, 6:30 p.m. both nights, and just come and experience this great creative way of talking about grief and hopefully having some meaningful conversations afterwards. I have one question that I want to close with, Elizabeth, today. Just one question, because although this is the second act, there's going to have to be a second act of the second act as we move forward, because there's so much more I want to talk to you about. I just want to ask this one question that we are preparing to ask every guest on the Due to Expire podcast, and that is this. If there was one thing that you can think of in your life that you could change, maybe something that you regret and you want to change it and you could change it, what would that one thing be and how would it impact your life today?
Wow. There are a number of things that I thought I would change, but when I think about them now, that would mean that I wouldn't have the life I have now.
Mm,
And I'm very, very grateful for the life I have now.
wow.
My first marriage was a disaster. Fortunately, there were no children involved, but it was a disaster. And I was living in LA. I was perfectly happy with my corporate job.
Hmm.
And my then husband wanted to move to Seattle. I didn't. I had friends. I had everything I wanted in LA.
Yeah.
But in an effort to kind of keep the marriage together, I agreed to move up here. And after a couple of years, he hated it and he moved back down to LA and we no longer together. But if I hadn't come up here with him, I never would have met my current husband and
Wow.
had two wonderful sons.
Yes.
Um, if I had stayed in New York to become an actress, maybe I would have been successful, maybe not. I was also the managing editor of a magazine in New York. If I had stayed, I watched The Devil Wears Prada, the
Oh,
first movie
yeah.
I watched,
The,
and
the
that could have
second
been
movie
my
that's
life.
coming out now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but the first one, I haven't seen the second, but the first one, that could have been my life as a managing editor. I could have been that Meryl Streep character.
Hmm.
I don't want to be the Meryl Streep, that character. I'm loving what I'm doing now with the family and sons and beautiful daughter-in-laws. And so to answer your question, I couldn't stop my dad from dying at age 65. That there's nothing I could have done there.
Right. Right.
So the one thing I wished I had more time with my dad, but that
Wow.
wasn't on me. So
Right. So no regrets. No
no
regrets.
regrets. I really
Wow.
don't. I really
That's
don't have regrets. If I think of a regret, it leads to something that came out of that I don't want to change. So
that is a beautiful way to answer that question. And I know that to our listeners, that has to be inspirational to know that, we say something in the spiritual area that all things work together, right, for the good of them who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so we hear that and we say, wow, okay, if this had not happened, then this may not have happened. And then I may not be where I am today. And so that's a great way of looking at life. So I thank you for that answer. And I thank
sure.
you for.
Can I tell you one more
Please,
little
please,
story on
please.
this topic? So my eldest son and his wife moved to Kingston, New York, not quite a year ago, and he's the head chef at a restaurant there that he's put on the map. He's just doing great, and she manages the restaurant. So they're just doing super. So Scott had been married before as well, no children,
Okay.
and his ex-wife moved from Seattle. I think she moved to DC for a while, but then she moved back home to Kingston, New York. So I had told Spencer when he and Jordan moved to Kingston, New York last June, that if you ever run into this woman, you have to say thank you. And Spencer was like, "Why do I say thank you?" I said, "Because if she hadn't divorced your father, you wouldn't be here." Well, that person came into his restaurant the other night.
Oh, wow.
He took a picture, obviously zooming in, and sent it to Scott and says, "This your ex-wife?" And we looked, and the eyes were the same. We went, "Yep, there she is." So apparently they enjoyed their dinner. Spencer didn't say anything, although his name is on the menu, and Coplan is spelled rather unusually. So who
Okay.
knows what she thought? But you gotta say thank you for the
Wow.
blessing of getting dumped.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, if she's listening now or anybody else listening now, look, we send our thank yous as well for helping to impact our lives in the way
Mhm.
that we're impacting, being impacted positively by you and Scott's work. So appreciate you both.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit more next time about your work with Scott and all of that stuff too as well. But I want to thank you for taking the time out
Oh,
today to be a part of this podcast and to really inspire many people who are going to listen to this and to help them to see that they too can have a strong, powerful second act in life. That's what we want to
yes,
have for everyone. So any
absolutely.
parting words for anybody today?
I just want to say I'm honored to be on your show, Corey. You know how much I appreciate you and your work. People out there, if you think about wanting to do something, give it a try. Maybe it didn't. I told Scott when he was about to retire, he had to pick three things he was going to do, knowing
Hmm.
full well that at least two of them were going to fall to the wayside. But that old saying, reach for the moon, and even if you fail, you fall among the stars.
Yes,
That's
yes.
kind of my motto. So.
All right. Well, due to expired listeners, that's it for us today. We appreciate you being a part of this experience. My friend Elizabeth Coplan, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time
you.
out to share your wisdom and your words of encouragement to the listeners today. And with that being said, we'll talk to you next time. Have a great one, everybody.